Well, hey guys, thanks for checking out Next Level Carpentry and another on-the-job job site impromptu video. I'm working on demolition here. I've got to take this whole French door and two windows out, and in the process I've got to remove the Dryvit or E.I.F.S system that's on the outside of the house. And because I don't like making a big mess, I want to show you a way to surgically remove this stuff that's pretty quick, efficient, and pain-free. The typical way of tearing this stuff off is with hammers and pry bars, just getting after it and pulling it off there. The trouble is, with this beadboard or a white styrofoam that's back there, it just makes a mess. It looks unprofessional and it takes more time, and once you're done taking it off, you got all that cleanup to do. So I've developed a system for surgically removing this that I think you might be interested in. Here's a piece of the material I've already taken off. Here's that styrofoam that's just crumbly and it blows around in the wind. And whether you know it or not, this whole stucco system, E.I.F.S, is made up of a layer of styrofoam, generally 1 inch thick. It's covered or strengthened by mesh on the edges and corners, but the rest of it is attached with screws and special plastic washers that hold the foam to the structure, and then the stucco is put on over after that with a trowel. A deck screw by itself wouldn't do a very good job of holding this styrofoam on because the screw heads would just pull through it, but with the special plastic washers that they use like this, it does a great job of holding the foam to the house and securing the whole Dryvit system. And because the screws and washers hold so well, this stuff is really tough to get off without breaking it up into a bunch of little pieces. And it has to be strong like that to put up with wind and weather and conditions where it's installed on a house. And once the Dryvit itself is adhered to the foam, it makes for a very sturdy panel. This is pretty tough stuff, which is hard to remove, but interestingly, it's only held on by screws. And you can see on a piece like this that it's roughly set in a 1 foot square grid. And because the screws are the only thing holding this on, if I can remove the screws, it almost falls off by itself. The way I deal with this is I take a Racketeer stud ball magnet. That's a neodymium magnet in a little dongle here. And that magnet is strong enough to locate the screw heads in those plastic washers through the layer of Dryvit. And that Dryvit's probably a good 1/4 inch thick where that screw head is. But once I locate a screw head, I just mark it with a Sharpie marker. So that I know with a good deal of accuracy where the head of that screw is. So the first step is to take that stud ball magnet and locate all the screw heads that I can find. Where the stucco is extra thick, the magnet has a difficult time locating the screw head, but with a little bit of patience and a good deal of observance, I feel pretty good that I've located all the screw heads. Now that the screws are all located, the real trick that I want to show you comes into play. I know there's a screw about here, but if I try to just drill in there with a screw tip, it's going to take forever. It'll dull the tip. I'll never accomplish that. And the approach I started with was just taking a hammer and tapping on there to try to expose the screw head so I could get the Phillips tip to grab. But that takes too long and it's kind of frustrating. So here it is. My tip involves little Thor here, the hammer, and a piece of pipe. This is a coupling for probably 1 1/4 inch black pipe. And all I want to do is put the center mark for the screw head in the middle of that pipe and give it a good wrap. Or 2 or 3, and presto, because the styrofoam around the screw compresses and the shaft of the screw doesn't, it just makes that Dryvit pop right out and expose the screw head so that I can take a Phillips drill and back out the screw. And you can see that was unrehearsed. I'll do a few more here and you'll see that sometimes all the mortar or all the Dryvit doesn't come out of the screw head and you got to do a little digging with the drill. But in all, it's pretty remarkable. Locate the screw, place the pipe, give it a whack, throw the pipe on the ground, back out the screw. I'll zoom the camera in here so you can get a close-up on what this process looks like in action. The Dryvit on this lower section here is a little thicker, but this still works just as good. A good sized socket works pretty well, an impact socket like this with a diameter, inside diameter about 1.25 inches or so, that works pretty good. But the pipe fitting works a little better because this edge is kind of sharp. This is a little more blunt on the socket, but the socket will work in a pinch. And I'm absolutely convinced there must be another screw hiding in this area, but maybe the installer got a text message while he's putting the screws up on this section and it never got a fastener. There's always got to be a stubborn one in a bunch, and that one was buried about 1/2 inch deep, but I only got to be lucky once. It's got to be lucky all the time. In places like this where I need a nice clean edge, I just use a multi-tool with an abrasive disc to cut through the outer skin of the Dryvit. I'm putting a new header in up here and I don't want to mess up a whole bunch of the wall, so that multi-tool gives me a nice surgical incision for the work. I don't really need to make that kind of a cut here, but I'll show you how fast it works to cut through the Dryvit, any mesh that's behind it, and into the styrofoam. And you're watching me make this cut in real time, not in speeded up, fast forward action during post-production. As you can see, that abrasive edge goes right through that Dryvit, and any remaining mesh or foam that needs to be cut, I use this long-handled pipe knife. And that'll clean up any little bit of mesh or the rest of the foam back there for a nice clean cut. Once the screws are out and the face is cut, I'll go ahead and pull off a panel. In this case, there's some caulking here at the bottom, so I'm using that pipe knife to just kind of trace the edge to prevent, or to give it a nice clean breakaway point. And that step is more necessary in some cases than the other. And this electrical junction box here might complicate things when I go to pull this off. But I lucked out this time, and there's about 4 square feet of Dryvit, all in one nice, neat piece. I don't have a mess going on up here, and most importantly, I don't have little bits of this styrofoam blown all over the job site. The missing screw in this grid was pretty hard to find, so I suspect it's under a deep layer of the Dryvit. Once I've located it, it comes out just like all the rest. And I suppose it's only fitting that there's a stubborn one in this bunch. But it's far better to only need the claw hammer for one screw instead of every one. Yep, and it figures that one was buried deeper than all the rest, almost 3/4 of an inch, but I still won the battle. Well, there it is then. Surgical removal of Dryvit E.I.F.S foam systems with a minimum of mess and aggravation. Well, this isn't the kind of video that gets millions of views, but I hope it's helpful for those of you that are faced with removing some of this E.I.F.S or Dryvit for a remodel or a facelift project that you're doing. If you like this kind of on-the-job, real-life carpentry stuff, I hope you'll consider subscribing to Next Level Carpentry if you haven't already. It's hardly the kind of content that generates millions of thumbs ups either, but if you find it useful and you can put it to use, hit the thumbs up button and give this video a little boost. It's no surprise, but I'll have a link in the video description to Amazon where you can see these few tools that I use here. Some of them are commonplace and should be available locally. Others are my go-to tools for demanding demolition jobs like this that might be a bit harder to find. Either way, you'll get a good look at the tools I take to the job site and rely on to make the work easier on myself, because no one else is going to do it for me, right? Purchases made through that link are the same low online price you expect, even though Amazon pays ad fees to me as an influencer that help justify the time I spend producing videos like this, which I always appreciate. Thanks to all the patrons who've signed up through a link in the video description to become a patron to the channel, because it helps Next Level Carpentry just be a more viable presence online, and I appreciate that as well. I hate to ruin my reputation for making long videos with in-depth content, but this is about as long as I can milk this thing out. So, as always, until next time, thanks for watching. Shooting video of a simple process like this is a great way to procrastinate, because before this job is done, I got to open up that wall and figure out how I'm going to remove the vertical logs that are in there and replace them with a 3-ply LVL header. Should be interesting.